Alrighty. Uh, Hi. uh, all right. So let's just get into this then. Dear husband.
In October 2017, I lost my husband while I was 7 weeks pregnant. And the day he died, I left for work in a hurry. We exchanged some texts after he woke up, discussing a phone interview that he had later that day and the pain that he was experiencing in his leg. We had a quick phone call a couple of hours later where he mentioned that he was running to the pharmacy for pain meds. About an hour after that, I tried calling him several times to make sure that he got home safely, but there was no answer, which was very unlike him. I kept calling him for hours until, finally, a woman answered his phone, and she told me that she was with the sheriff's
I'm good.
department and asked me to come home. At the time, I worked in a prison, and fearing that he might have gotten into some sort of trouble, I left my post, got to my car, and sped through the 30-minute drive back to town. As I turned into our parking garage, I saw a large white van that read, Coroner. When I approached our home, I was greeted by the same woman who had spoken to me on the phone, blocking my view into the house. She informed me that my husband had suffered a heart attack, later confirmed as a pulmonary embolism, which explained locked the security door and then collapsed. He screamed for help. Our neighbor and her son apologized for not breaking a window, saying that in his shock and panic he lost all sense of reason. They spoke to my husband through the door while they called 911, but he stopped responding just moments before help arrived, and he was pronounced dead on arrival. A week or so after his service, his best friend's wife offered me a cleansing and a card reading by her mother. And although I was skeptical, I was desperate for any kind of communication with him or closure. And during the reading, she mentioned many interesting things, but what stood out the most was that my husband was in a stage after death where the soul relives its entire life, similar to when people say that their life flashes before their eyes. She explained that this is a place every soul visits after death, as a way to reflect on the life they lived. She also said his death was so sudden that he hadn't yet realized that he had died, and that I would need to help him cross over. She felt strongly that I was the one who could help him and instructed me to light white candles and place a jar of water to guide him to peace. Now, a few months later, I moved into my parents' house. One day, while lying on the couch, I suddenly felt a heavy sensation, almost as if I had been administered anesthesia. It felt like sleep paralysis. When I could finally open my eyes, I was still on the couch in my parents' living room, but my husband was sitting on a chair right in front of me, as clear and as real as he had been before he died. Before I could even speak, he started talking. He told me that he was nervous about his upcoming phone interview, the one that he had the day he passed. He said he was excited and hopeful about getting the job and asked for help preparing. I looked at him with tears in my eyes, feeling the weight of what I had to say. I told him, "Baby, I'm so sorry. Do you remember the pain in your leg? You had blood clots. One of them made its way to your heart. You aren't going to make it to the interview, baby. You died." I'll never forget the look on his face. I apologized again, told him I loved him, and begged him to respond, but he just sat there with that strange expression. And suddenly, I woke up. The chair from my parents' kitchen table was now sitting directly in front of me, empty. I never dreamed of him again after that, and I pray it's because I gave him the closure that he needed to cross over. We now have a 5-year-old son who often dreams very specific dreams about his father. He talks about things that he couldn't possibly know unless it came directly from him. Losing my husband was my first real experience with death, but it brought me peace to have my own confirmation that there is something more after this life.
Wow, that was interesting.
It was autumn of 2015. I was 23 years old, and I'm 31 now. During that time, I lived in Lancaster as I was studying at Lancaster University. And for those who may not be familiar, Lancaster is a small and rather quaint town in the north of England. And as a student, you could either live at the university campus or in private accommodation in the town. I had decided to live in a newly built, renovated apartment in a nice side of town, and yes, it was very expensive, sadly. I had already been studying for 2 years and had reached my 3rd year. By this time, I had grown accustomed to the layout of the town and felt comfortable and safe living there semi-independently, with 2 other friends who were also studying at the university. Since my 1st year, I had decided to improve my fitness by taking nightly runs around either the campus or the town. As we were living in the town center by my 3rd year, I would run either with my housemate or alone. The important thing to note about Lancaster, and this will be important later, is that it has quite a large residential area that is hilly and far removed from the bustling center, which at that time was a hub for the students or the local northern folk, probably drinking in pubs or eating pies. Occasionally, I would run with my housemate. However, I preferred to run alone and listen to some kind of heavy metal. I'm a big fan of Deftones during that period of time. I decided to run alone. It was about 8 p.m. and I had my earphones in. I had started to run up to the more isolated district that led to a very pretty residential area in a large green called Williamson Park. It had a butterfly museum on the top of a hill. And next to the park was a very large graveyard, the kind that is miles wide and had different areas. Large yew trees, crumbling graves, and a crypt in the center overrun with leaves and ivy. What was especially creepy about this particular cemetery was that it had the ruin of an old mental asylum or hospital at the other side.
Why?
You could actually sneak in if you walked across the width of the cemetery and crawled through a small hole in the fence that led to the asylum grounds. This was not advised, though, as guard dogs roamed the derelict building. It was not a place that you wanted to be during the night. So I had made my way past Williamson Park and up to the entrance of the graveyard. Immediately, my eyes were drawn to something small standing at the imposing gates of the graveyard. They were kind of tall, black iron gates that were at the bottom of a little winding path. I felt a little apprehensive, but it wasn't unusual to see people walking their dogs, etc., out of the graveyard, and so I started to slow my pace to a walk in the direction of the shape. And as I drew them, they were running towards me frantically. They looked panicked and scared, and I think that they were crying. I vividly remember that the girl was not wearing a coat, only a thin dress that would not be suitable for the harsh Lancastrian autumn. She asked me if I could help her. She was desperate and seemed to be frightened of something, and she kept looking back into the graveyard, which at this point was totally pitch black beyond the gates. I mean, there was absolutely no light beyond the path. As the graveyard was quite large, it was chilling to see the depth of the blackness and the vulnerable child standing at the mouth of the gate, helpless. I don't recall what the girl said exactly, but then I offered to call the local police. I had typed 999 and had it on loudspeaker. The girl immediately changed. She was not happy about the fact that I was calling the police. That was clear. She stopped crying and seemed angry, almost demanding, and insisted that she did not need the police to help. I reassured her that it was best to inform them, even offered to walk her to the station, which was about 20 minutes back down the hill. And this is where the story gets weird and a little terrifying. The girl turned and ran back into the graveyard. She ran directly through the gates into the eerie blackness. She didn't turn back, just ran as quickly as possible until she had completely disappeared. It was then totally silent. I was spooked beyond belief. Now standing in a darkened street completely alone, I had so many questions. Who was the girl? Why was she alone? Why was she scared of the police? Why wasn't she afraid of the dark? and who might be she running to or from? I turned and ran all the way back down the hill, not stopping until I had reached a well-lit, built-up area. And safe to say, I didn't run on my own again at night.
Yeah, smart idea. Don't run on your own.
In the day, I sometimes joke that he used to hunt people for a living, but as he's corrected me on more than one occasion, it's more like he used to hunt the people who hunt people. The people hunter, if you will. And he's told me some pretty wild stories, especially around Christmas and Thanksgiving. The kind he only tells late at night after a few bottles of beer and when all those with more sensitive ears have retired upstairs to go to sleep. And most of them are war stories. Pretty great ones, make no mistake, but a lot of drive, shoot, arrest the bad guys, then home in time for pot roast and pie, as they say. But there was one story he told me that I haven't really been able to shake, and I'd like to share it with you. They've been tracking this one fugitive for months, all across the country, when they suddenly got an eyewitness sighting of the guy at a Bible school out in rural Ohio. Under the assumption that they seemed like real nice folks out there, a little naive, but warm enough, and at first it seemed like they were doing their best to cooperate. But as time went by, it became more and more obvious that not only were the Bible school's staff and principal elaborately stonewalling them, but the place was much, much more than just a Bible school. The reason why an Ohio Bible school was so focused to shield a violent fugitive is that it was a cult. And I use the word cult very loosely because I feel like that suggests a bunch of weird naked rituals involving black magic where maybe Tom Cruise makes an appearance or something. I don't know. That's an Eyes Wide Shut reference. You can't sue me for that. But what this place was just very close-knit, a Christian community that believed in absolute forgiveness and were willing to put themselves on the line for each other. They were smart enough not to make it obvious that they were aiding and abetting a criminal, but at the same time, it's no coincidence that their person of interest was never around whether the marshals stopped by. Things got more and more tense as time went by, too. My father-in-law and his partner kept on coming back day after day, making it clear that they weren't going anywhere until they got a sit-down interview with the man they believed was their fugitive. Eventually, the school's principal snaps at the marshals and tells them to come back with a warrant or not at all. Well, they went and got themselves a warrant, and then they came back with uniformed officers too, just in case the students put up any resistance. And according to my father-in-law, the school was set up as 4 buildings, with a field and meeting square in the center of them. Then as the marshals and their uniformed accompaniment walk onto the property, students start walking out of the building to give them death stares, including the principal. My father-in-law and the uniforms are walking slightly behind, and they see the kid before his partner does. So as soon as this 18 or 19-year-old kid starts to approach with a face like thunder, everyone starts telling him to stay where he is and to not come any closer. Seeing as this kid appears to be unarmed and looks to be about a buck and change soaking wet, they're all They start taking out their weapons and issuing the commands more seriously. But then the second they do, the kid just rushes them. He sprints towards my father-in-law's partner, but no one's shooting him because they don't want a scandal on their hands and they're not really sure what to do in that moment. My father-in-law said that he could see the headlines already. Feds raid Bible school, 1 innocent student slain, and things of that nature. He knew pulling the trigger might kill his career before it had ever really started, so he chose not to. But he then spent the rest of his career wishing he had. I guess his partner ended up wishing that he shot the kid too, but he didn't, and instead, he got ready to receive his weak tackle so he could wrestle him to the dirt and put him in cuffs. But the kid didn't try and tackle him so much as he just walked up and hugged him, with his big old smile on his face instead of a frown. The kid must have been much stronger than he looked because when he clamped himself onto my father-in-law's partner, he started legitimately struggling to get him off. Now my father-in-law and the uniform start walking over to lend a hand, lowering their weapons because the kid's got a screw loose, but he doesn't seem dangerous. But he was. He was dangerous. They just didn't realize it until they saw what he had in his hands. My father-in-law's partner didn't see it because obviously the kid's hands were way around his back. But the others did, and when they saw it, they practically threw themselves backwards in an attempt to put whatever distance they could between my father-in-law's partner, the kid, and what the kid had in his hands, which to their absolute shock and horror was a goddamned hand grenade. And it must have only been a matter of seconds between the time they spotted the grenade and when it actually exploded. And when it did, it tore both men apart. And what followed was pure chaos. Everyone pointing guns at the students standing by the buildings, all the while backing up toward the way they came in. Because of the layout of the buildings at the school, they were in the perfect place for an ambush. After a bunch of backup arrived, the cops turned the whole place inside out. And it took another year before the marshals were able to track him down again, and when they did, he'd set himself up in yet another Bible school, only this one was up in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. The guy was halfway into talking the students into defending him with their lives again when the marshals finally got their hands on him. And that time, their play was a lot smarter and a lot more subtle. My father-in-law got to question him at one point, but when he did, he said he got chills from just maintaining eye contact with the guy. He said he was the most charming, personable individual he'd ever come across, the kind of guy that could sell sand to the Arabs and snow to the Eskimos. He said after talking to the guy for more than 10 to 15 minutes, he understood how he might be able to convince someone to blow themselves up just to defend him. He said he felt that he was reading him, not like a book either. Those take time. My father-in-law said the guy read him like a stop sign. One look and he knew all he needed to know. One look and he knew exactly how to talk to my father-in-law to get him to lower his defenses, so to speak. He said he never fell under that guy's spell or anything like that. He knew the fugitive was a master manipulator just from the interviews they'd conducted with the Bible school students, so he had it in the front of his mind the whole time that the guy was trying to win him over. But he also said that by the time 10 to 15 minutes had elapsed, he'd never felt so uncomfortable sitting in the same room as a suspect than he did that day. He'd sat in the same room as mass murderers, people who hurt children, people smugglers, all kinds of hardcore scumbags. But sitting across from those guys, you knew what they were, because they couldn't hide what they were. Whereas with the Bible school fugitive, it was like he could change his face depending on who he was talking to. My father-in-law said the guy ended up going to federal prison for his original crime, which I guess was some kind of financial fraud. I'm not sure of exactly what it was. But even combined with all the charges relating to him absconding from the law, his sentence didn't even top 15 years. My father-in-law knew the guy would probably get out of there before that too, and the idea of having someone like that back on the street was terrifying to him. He said he was the scariest son of a bitch he'd ever had the displeasure of coming across. And what scared him the most is that it was only a matter of time before he was back out that people were going to die.
Jesus Christ. Well, I'm gonna stop this here because I need to make myself um dinner. Even though it's only 6:40, but still, I need to make myself some dinner and eat, and yeah, I'll definitely be live stream again. Uh, it'll be I don't know what I'll stream, but I'll definitely come back to this video, so I'll save this video to do a video of this, a second part to this, but yeah.